when did you get to Austin, and what precipitated you coming to Austin?
I got to Austin in 1991 to go to school, St. Edward's. My older brother, was already going to school at St. Ed's, and he really enjoyed it. My parents liked it. As Catholics growing up, I was in Houston from 8 years old to 18, and he had come up to St. Ed's, and so I followed him up here. Essentially, he was the only person I knew at St. Ed's, which was kind of cool. A lot of my high school buddies were going to different places throughout the state, and I thought it would be cool to start somewhere brand new. And so made it to Austin and never regretted that decision.
So when you get here, as we talked about a few weeks ago, there were some things going on in the sports scene, like the Cowboys training camp at St. Edward's. So kind of just talk to me, because at that point you weren't really focused on becoming a sports talk show host, right?
Well, I mean, I think I don't want to say focused on, but it was something that I really wanted to look into. I wanted to get into something in communications with sports and covering sports. I got really involved with the St. Edward's baseball team when I first got there. Big baseball, guy. Thought maybe one day I could play, but at the same time, just got really involved. I did the PA announcing at the St. Ed's baseball games. Got to be really good buddies with all the players and the coaches, and so I was around the baseball team a lot. And so that was just a natural, to kind of flow to your natural group. So from the baseball side, at St. Ed's, a small campus, you meet all the athletes, right? The volleyball team and the soccer team. So those were all my fast friends. And so it was around the sports side of St. Ed's. But knew I wanted to either write like you do or do television. I did a couple of internships. I did one with Mike Barnes at KVU Sports when I was at St. Ed's, just to try out the TV thing. And I was into radio because I was a weird kid growing up in Houston. I've said this on the radio many times. I used to watch games like the Houston Rockets or the Houston Oilers or the Astros, Phi Slamma Jamma, and I would then want to go listen to the postgame, like as the weird kid, because we used to be, when we lived in Northwest Houston, you had to drive to the Astrodome or downtown. Any pro game was an hour away, so to drive home, my dad would always listen to the postgame show. So I got into, I love the whole caller engagement and immediate reactions and your thoughts. But this is the 80s, and there really wasn't an all sports radio station. That wasn't a thing. So if I would tell my parents, that's what I want to do, they're like, what are you talking about? How do you do that? But so when I got St. Ed's, that was always on my mind. And it was always something I thought I could be pretty decent at. But, So St. Ed's was great, but they didn't have a very robust communications department. So I did do the internships where I could find one. And then yes, the real stroke of luck was the Cowboys, chose St. Ed's to do their training camps. And so to be around that in August and into September each year, and certainly for the last 2 years I was in college, was huge, because that's where I saw the Ticket in Dallas and whatever their radio stations would be. They would come and set up, and I actually worked at St. Ed's at the Recreation and Convocation Center, the RCC, which is where they play basketball, volleyball team plays, graduations are. But that's where the Cowboys kind of made their home headquarters. The weight room was there. They took over the whole gym and put up all the weights out there. So the Cowboys were there. So that's where the radio shows would set up, right in the RCC. So I was in there. I'd watch them set up their tables and watch their equipment and how they plug in, and just be curious. But that was great. So I got to be around them, and I got to be around the Cowboys and all the national media that would show up. So that was kind of cool, just to see it from behind the curtain a little bit. And that led to when I graduated, that because I had done the TV internships and I had written for the school paper and all those things. I knew one of those was going to be my avenue, but I wanted to pursue radio first. I wanted to make that the first try, and then got very lucky that my roommate's girlfriend at the time, now wife of 30 years, she got a tip that the first all sports radio station was being put on the air in Austin, called Sports Fan 1490. She was doing sales at what was Clear Channel at the time, and I guess in her office memo said, hey, we've just bought two new radio stations. One's a news talk that we're flipping to all sports, and she brings home this memo, and she's like, here, you need to probably know this, because she knew what I wanted to do. She handed me that, and so I had probably a 2-week head start on most, for anybody to know that this was happening. So I said to her, I said, who do I need to talk to there? I want to go help and be part of the launch of that and see if I can get my foot in the door. And she told me, well, the only person I know is this person. So I just walked in and said, "Can I meet with so and so?" And it was a young lady, Jenny Scoggins, and I said, "Who should I talk to?" And she pointed me over to Max, who was putting on the radio station. So they brought me on as an intern immediately, and because they didn't have anybody. So that's where it started. That was 1996-ish, 96. So Sports Fan 1490. That's where it was the first one, and it was part of the Clear Channel group. I did sports reports in the morning on Z102, Classic Rock Z102 back in the day. So that was it. That started it. And so yes, I was always, and then got lucky. Unlike whether you do TV or radio, you kind of have to leave and go to a small market somewhere, and never had to. I got that opportunity at Sports Fan, which led to the Zone and everything else. So I never had to leave Austin.
So I want to go through the kind of like chronologically what you did, but I want to go back to St. Ed's and the Cowboys. Give me a story from the Cowboys training camp that you covered that you remember to this day, because I'm sure there was lots of things going on. I remember all the things when they're being in town. It was a circus. I mean, that they were America's team. And so just tell me kind of an experience you remember.
So many, Kyle. I mean, gosh. Well, just because it's your school, right? And so, and they're now living in the summertime. They're living in the dorms that you lived in. So I know Doyle Hall and Fremont Hall, and they ate at the mess hall or food hall, the food cafeteria where we got our meals when I was living in the dorms. There's something neat about them. You know what they're where they're staying, what they're doing. And it was just fun. It was a circus. You mentioned it. I mean, it was a circus. I mean, the ones that jump out was, and this was for people to remember 1995. That's when they were going from Jimmy Johnson from terrible to great to 3 Super Bowls. So they were there. They were rock stars. It was crazy. The year they brought in Deion Sanders, and that whole offseason was nuts. He showed up with this Mercedes golf cart with a big speaker system in it, because all the Cowboys had golf carts, and that's how they drove from the field to the RCC and then over to the dorms, because it was probably a mile walk over there, half a mile. So they would drive, they'd line it, and they could ride their golf carts back and forth and drive them all over campus. So that was cool. But Deion had to have Deion's primetime mobile, which was awesome. The thing that stands out the most from like the newsy side of things, other than winning Super Bowls, was I covered the press conference, and it was actually cool because it crossed over. The Cowboys last year was when I was just getting in. I was done with school and I was in radio now, I believe, or close to it. And I actually covered the Barry Switzer press conference. If you remember, Barry Switzer carried a gun into the airport, and it became this huge news story in Dallas for sure. It's like so I went to this press conference, and he's trying to explain how his grandkids were at his house because he was coming to camp to start camp, and he gets popped at the airport with a pistol in his bag, and he's the head coach of the Cowboys, and of course it's like, what the hell is happening here? And he tells the story that his grandkids were in town staying with him the weekend before, so he wanted to hide his gun so it wasn't anywhere where anybody could find it, so he put it in his bag and then put his bag up in his closet, but he forgot to take it out of the bag, and so he loaded it and packed, and his gun, who believes that story? But either way, so that was a big one. And then, as that's happening, I would flip on the radio and I would hear, Jeff Ward, who works with us here at ESPN, and Bill Schoening. Then they were talking about that story. Can you believe Barry Switzer? What a dope! Da, 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 da. And so I don't know. You'd be able to connect the dots, be at the press conference, see some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, how mad Jerry Jones was at that, and then to hear the chatter that was going on, and the Dallas stations talking about it. That was awesome. Very impactful. That you're in the center of the news cycle world, and those are the kind of things I want to be talking about on the radio.
So did you ever have during that time an interview with any of the players that stands out?
Not really. No, because like I said, I transitioned out of St. Ed's and into radio, and so I covered the camp that last year. 96, I believe, was their last year, and so I would go do interviews with the players that they would have availabilities, and I had watched that because when I was an employee there and my student job, I just tried to stay out of the way and help where I could help, and didn't do any of that. I was part of the labor force at that point, but when it became my job, it was great. I used to go out and watch. The ESPN would then do the live hits, because once I wasn't in the dorm, I lived in an apartment that was like closer than my dorm was to St. Ed's and the campus, right across the street there at Woodward. So I'd come over there, and ESPN would be doing live shots from the Cowboys camp, so I'd watch that. So interviews, it was so immersive for me to start that way, and I don't know, you felt like you had a leg up. And then not long after that, I convinced Sportsfan 1490 to let me, because the Houston Oilers, who were my favorite team, grew up on a huge Love You Blue fan, but this was before they left. they were training in San Antonio. And then when I first got to San Antonio, they were training in San Marcos. If you remember that, the Oilers came up, and right there by the Strahan Coliseum, they would do their training camp on those little football fields. And then they ended up at Trinity, and in the last year with Jeff Fisher and Eddie George and those teams, they were in San Antonio. So I went down and covered that one time. So, this is like the formative of, I can get a press credential and I can go cover that, and that's cool, and I'm going to do that. So that was huge. The St. Ed's thing was, and the Cowboys being there was massive to kind of launching what I wanted to do.
So then kind of just walk me through chronologically your career and the stations that you've worked with. I mean, we talked about like you've worked afternoon shows, morning shows. So just kind of go through that, just a little summary of your career.
So from Sportsfan 1490, old heads will remember a guy named Max Miller did a show. He was my first boss there, and he was the only employee, he and I. And that's why they hired me eventually, and he was doing a morning show in the voice of a guy named Dribblin' Dick Dickerson. And then Max would come back and he would do the morning show as Max Miller, which was kind of a straight-laced mornings talk show. I produced it, and then he would come back in the afternoon. I would produce the afternoon show, and he would be Max Dribblin' Dick Dickerson doing this totally different voice that if you ever heard it, you'll never forget it. And he was a very talented guy. And so, I had the ability at that time. I was producing both shows. I'd come in, do the morning, come back, do the afternoon. He would do the same. So we were the team. And that was awesome. That didn't last long. It lasted about a year. And then he ended up getting a job up in Dallas at the Ticket. And so his talents took him to Dallas, and the station didn't replace him because there wasn't anyone like him. So I just ran the station as far as the automation, and we did some high school football on Friday nights that I was a part of and whatever. So that was 96 to 98 or 99. And then but I also remember, because of being at Sportsfan, I could get, and it was Clear Channel, so I could get credentials. So I covered the hiring of Augie Garrido's press conference when Augie came in, and the Coach Gus thing blew up. Rick Barnes was hired, and then Mac Brown was hired. And you could see where things were going at Texas, and I was like, man, I could go look for another job somewhere else, but I want to stay in Austin. I want to be here because this is getting good. And that's when the Zone came online. AM 1300, the Zone. They started the first all sports radio station. Sportsfan 1490 was technically the first one, but we weren't doing a lot down the dial. This became the first local all sports, talking sports radio station, and was fortunate enough through some connections I had made through Cowboys camp and covering the Longhorn press conferences that I had met the right people, the John Bedanis and Bill Schonings of the world, and they put in a good word with the boss there, Chuck Meyer. So he hired me and to do updates, like zone updates, news, kind of ticket tickers kind of thing. I think if you listen to those. So I got hired to do that, and that was summer of '99. And that's when I met Bucky. Bucky was there. Bucky was leaving agent coaching side of things, wanted to get in the radio. So we met, and that's so to the chronology to the Zone to be an update guy, which led to Bucky getting a 1-hour show before Bill Schoening and Craig Way's show to talk sports. And Bucky was to say he was raw was an understatement. And so I would do the Zone update, and then I'd stay in there and talk to him. So he had somebody to bounce things. I mean, Bucky's the funniest guy ever and the huge personality. But when you're staring, there's a mic there and you don't have anybody to talk to, it can get a little unnerving. So he felt more comfortable if I just stayed in there. And so I would stay in there between the top and the bottom of the hour, Zone updates, and we would talk. And it became a fun show. The chemistry bounced back and forth, and Bucky was hilarious. So I would just kind of set him up as I could, add information where I could. And that built, it was crazy. That's another stroke of luck, like the Cowboys, to meet Bucky, to be there at that time. And then really we got that show, Kyle, because Bill and Craig started at 3 and the Jim Rome show ended at 2, and they didn't have anything to put on in that hour. So they're like, well, why don't you guys do it? And Lise Hudson was our boss. She said Bucky could do the hour. So we did that, and it went so well with our original, ratings started to grow and audience. And they moved us from 1 to 3, and then I think that we went from 1 to 4 or 2 to 4, whatever the time frame was. It grew. And then they said, put us in the morning. So that's when Bucky and I moved to the morning. So that was 2001-ish when they put us in the morning. And that obviously is coinciding when Texas is starting to kick butt in all the sports. And so that was that was pretty cool. And we were the flagship for the Horns and Mac Brown, and we had our run-ins with Mac, of course, and that whole thing. We had a lot of fun with that. But I mean, that was the glory days of Texas. I mean, that was Augie's going to the Omaha and winning national titles, and Rick's in the Final Four with T.J. Ford, and Mac is building it. It was fun. So our show as a morning show, the only morning show in town, really grew. It took off, and everybody wanted to talk Texas, and so we were very, very lucky. And that went all the way until 2008. And after the Longhorns won the national championship, a lot started to change with the station, and people left. We lost really good talent. Schoening left to go to the Spurs at one point, he was a fixture. Brian Jones was with us for a while, and he took off to go do what he's doing now on CBS Sports, because that national championship year kind of launched a lot of things where people. Kevin Dunn left. Kevin was doing our afternoon show with Chad. And Kevin left to go do CBS Sports in New York because he had been on Real World, so he knew some people back there. So he left. So, and the station for cheap channel or whatever they called it at the time, Clear Channel, they would let these good people go and they wouldn't replace them. And they would just and then they want to know why ratings are dropping. It's like, well, you're losing really talented people, and you're not adding people. And now Bucky and I were still the fixture in the morning, but the afternoon started to dip a little bit, and they blamed the wrong thing. But either way, they made a leadership change that we didn't like very much, and they brought in a guy from out of town, Detroit, that we didn't see eye to eye with and whatnot. Didn't know Austin, and that got sour. So Bucky and I kind of set a plan to try to use the leverage of the show, and because there was another station group firing up that we thought, and they wanted to bring us over, and the whole contractual part, we kind of played our way through that. So 2008, I left, January of 2008. And Bucky was going to come with me, but then they made him an offer to keep him. Either way, so we got split up in 2008. Turns out it was a great idea in theory, and I'm glad I did it in hindsight, but at the same time, the market crashed in 2008. So the company I was going to work for kind of went bankrupt. And the startup, the new station, that was 1530 and AM 1260. It was ESPN on the AM dial, but it had two signals. And they brought me over. And when Bucky didn't come, then they just made me the program director, and we just had to build that station out. And that was the rough times, because I think everybody financially was having a hard time there, because you can go back to 06, 05 when the Horns were winning, and I'm doing the morning show and everything's great, and now I've made the move, and it wasn't like it was any better over Clear Channel as far as that goes, but same thing. Everyone's trying to cut costs, and radios changing with digital, and here it comes. So, but that was fun. It was challenging because they had a lot of changes and bosses and ownerships, but that led to us, getting together and saying, well, how can we take these two FM signals and create something and try to, because of bankruptcies in the market of radio groups, including ours, there was consolidation. Like the creditors, Goldman Sachs essentially would come and they took our two stations and put them with three others that were not doing well, which had an FM signal, which was 104.9, which they said, well, could we take the sports and put it on FM? Because that was in the market. The Zone was still on AM at the time and still is. So we were going to have a chance to be the only FM sports talk, the first FM sports talk. So we put our heads together, came up with the name of The Horn, and put that on the air it was November of 2009, but it really, I would say 2010 was the first year that The Horn was a thing. As far as anybody's recognizing it. So we went on the air at 104.9, the Horn grew, and the challenging parts early were because of different owners. I think I had 4 different owners between 2009 and 2015, probably 4 different ownership groups, and a group out of Dallas, and then a group, we had whatever. It was a messy time behind the scenes, but the Horn got on the air and started to grow. So we started to add people and build the station out, and then along about 2015, I think, I'd have to look at the dates, is when the group out of Dallas sold it to Bob Cole and Jason Nasur, and they had started Coke FM, if you remember, and so that all started. Interesting story. So we were in this building, and we were owned at the time, building out in Westlake, with used to be like 6 radio stations and way too much space. And when the market changed, a lot of that, it was just empty space, but they were still paying rent. So the Dallas group called Taser, who owned us, they're the ones that moved me to the afternoons, by the way, in your chronology. They wanted to go full ESPN, still be called the Horn, but affiliate with ESPN. So they were carrying Mike and Mike in the morning. So that kicked me to the afternoons for a while there, which I wasn't a huge fan of at all. But at the same time, their choice. But so they made that decision. But that led to me pointing, because they were looking for. I knew Eric Rains at Coke FM from our days at Clear Channel, a good friend of mine. And so I had talked to Eric about, hey, why don't you guys are doing Coke FM, you're independent, we're independent. What if we just did like a golf tournament? I'll bring the sports guys, you bring the music guys, and we'll do a big Rocks and Jocks kind of golf tournament just for fun and promote the stations and that kind of stuff. He thought it was a good idea, but he was like, no, maybe one day soon, but we're about to be out of our our rent, our lease is up where Coke FM was, which was out by, the old Reagan High School there on 290. And I said, well, we got a bunch of space over here. Why don't you have Bob and Jason call our bosses? Because I bet we could be roommates of some kind. That wasn't my idea. We got enough space here. Come over here. We share costs. You guys do radio on your end. We do radio on our end. And that led to Coke coming back with the Horn. And then when they got together, Bob and Jason realized, wait a second, we could probably acquire that because the Dallas group wants out and they're about to, they don't want to do radio anymore. They're bankers. So, they were all big UT fans who thought it would be UT suite owners who thought it would be nice to be in radio for a while, but they decided they didn't like that. And they were in Dallas, so it made it challenging. But either way, that led to Coke FM LMA or taking over the Horn. So now you had Coke FM oldies or 105.3 and then the 104.9 signal. And so that's when things really took off, because then, Bob Cole got in his mind that they could get the rights to UT, and that's in the middle when Steve Patterson is taking over at UT and he wants to be outside the box. So we ended up in 2015-ish, I think, getting the rights to UT, and that's when the Horn really took off and we were carrying UT games. And so so from 2015 through 2023 and the demise of the Horn, I was at the Horn. So about 13 years at the Horn, 9 years at the Zone, and now been at 102.7 ESPN here, Waterloo Media, which is long established, for 2. So 2023 to now, through 2026. So 2 years. So that's the long and short of it. But yes, it was a great run. To be a part of the first all sports station of any kind, then the first actual local sports talk on the Zone, because Sports Fan 1490, then the Zone, then be a big part of putting the Horn on the air and running the Horn for more than a decade, and hiring great people. I thought we had a pretty kick-ass radio station, because the Horn didn't fall apart because of the talent and the ratings, and it would have helped had UT won more football games in that stretch, and basketball games, by the way. That would have helped, but at the same time, the listenership was always there. People cared, and we had, myself and Bucky were back together, and Kevin Dunn was back, and we have Chad Hastings, and we had really talented people. Mike Harge and Rod Babers came over, and we added, when Rod joined us, that was a really big deal. Brad Kellner and Trey Elling and all those guys. We had a really cool local lineup that the audience really liked. COVID really derailed the Horn, to be honest with you. COVID hit, and as a local small radio group, it took its toll, and I don't know that they ever fully came back from that. But and Coke FM suffered the same fate. Coke FM was kind of keeping everything afloat with that Coke Fest deal, the big concert thing they did every year. That made us a good amount of money. But either way, COVID really made it difficult coming out of that.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because that was one of the first questions I have for you. Is you talked about it, the coverage of, like, I know 2002 was the baseball championship, 2005. So you have these big moments where UT Sports was at its peak and all these the major sports. But talk to me about the actual moments. For example, COVID was something that changed, obviously, the station, but then 9/11. So talk to me about what that was like coming on the air, because I remember I worked at Dell and driving to Dell. So tell me about what it was like, that experience for you at 9/11.
Oh man, I still get goosebumps thinking about it, but thinking and talking about it. But at the same time, there are so many people that we hear from every September 11th that text and say, I heard the news from you guys, because Bucky and I were on the air, because it happened between 7:30 and just after 8 o'clock in the morning, and so we were middle of some UT talk. I mean, we're talking about Texas. They had just beaten North Carolina. It was Corey Redding had a big game and a touchdown in that game. So I mean, I just remember it's so etched in your mind because shows can just kind of add up, and it's Groundhog Day. That's why sports radio is great. The content's different all the time. It's not the same. But that was the drumbeat of fire Greg Davis, who like no one liked Greg Davis, and the tunnel screen. And so I just remember we were having mundane conversations about that even though Texas beat North Carolina by a lot, people were still mad at Greg Davis. And then, the first plane hit, and we weren't watching it. We were watching ESPN in our little studio there on Lamar, and at the time. And it's funny because she's still in the market too, but Ann Hudson, who's been a star over at Clear Channel for a long, long time, Ann peeked her head in, and Ann had just come from Texas Tech, and she was doing traffic for us on the Zone and on what was KVET and Case. So she was doing the traffic, and she's this pretty little thing, and she peeks her head in during a commercial break and says, "Hey, you might want to flip it over to the news. Something's happening in New York City." And I was like, "What?" And so, we flip it over to ABC News or whatever. And that was in our 7:45 break, and so the plane had hit, and it's so coincidental. But our producer at the time, a guy named Brian Ruiz, his dad was like a pretty high up guy in the FBI, and so during the commercial break, he called his dad, and he says, "Dad, are you seeing this? Any idea?" And he was the one that told us in the break that his dad told him, and we went on the air. We're very careful about what we said, but he said they think this is a commercial flight. They don't think this is some small plane or whatever he came back with, which was how he got that fast before the internet is even a thing. And we were like, we didn't say anything about it on the radio. I came on the air and said, "Yeah, we just want you to know," and this is what the audience heard was, there's been a situation in New York. Details are very thin, but looks like an airplane of some kind has hit the World Trade Center. And but I had heard, in my head, that because now I'm getting worried. I'm like, oh geez, because if Brian's dad is right and that's a commercial jet, that's a huge deal. That's not just some out of control small plane pilot. And so that break came. We got probably back into the segment by 48-ish, and gave that piece of the news, and just went back to talking about whatever we had been talking about. Took some phone calls or read some texts or whatever we did. To the top of the hour. We went to break at about 7:55 or 56, and we never came back because by the time we got to the top of the hour news, and we would have come back, the second plane hit, and the whole building went to national ABC radio feed. So we never came back on that Tuesday. So at that point, so for all of you who did hear that, there was about 20 minutes, 23. That was about it, and then we were off for the day, and we all sat back like everyone and just watched. Until about the buildings came down, and then we were like, well, now what do we do? Walk out like zombies, and I got to go pick up my kids. They were at the daycare, and I had to go grab them, get them home, and I think like everybody, just like, what's next? We're in Austin, Texas. The president's right here. Like, are they coming? So that terrifying thing. So we didn't actually. That was Tuesday, obviously, and 25 years, amazing. But that was a Tuesday, and we didn't come back on the air until the next Monday. All the stations, it was national news the rest of the week, and so we stayed off. And then when we did come back, which was kind of cool, it was the first time we did it as a radio station, but they put all of us in a room and let's just talk about it, whether it be Bob Cole and Sammy Allred at the time and us and just all the shows together, just to make it a united conversation about not just sports, because at that point that would have been really hard to do a sports talk show or whatever Bob and Sammy were doing. You can't do a normal show at that point. So we did a kind of a special, and that led to raising money and doing fundraisers, and but it was pretty pivotal. And I think that was the time that we were moving to our new building too. It all kind of coincided. But either way, because we moved from South Lamar over to South Austin, down by St. Edward, right next to St. Edwards, which was full circle moment when we moved into Penfield. And was right. I was back to within, a long driver from my old apartment that I lived when I was at St. Ed's, doing radio from right there, which was kind of cool. But yeah, that was 9/11, and so we'll never, ever, ever, ever forget it. But yeah, we were talking about Monday Night Football the night before. Giants played the Broncos. We're talking about the Longhorns, and next thing you know, the world's changed.
So take me to the other world-changing moment. And you talked about the stations being affected, COVID, and when that hit, which was, that's only been 6 years ago. But I mean, kind of talk to me about what that was like for you, talking about it and it happening and what was going on.
Well, I mean, we were all kind of watching the news that, cities were shutting down all over the world, so we were kind of keeping an eye on it. And we knew that South by Southwest was about to begin, which was people coming from all over the world, which that was going to be interesting. So, it was a news story, and I will give credit back to, because my first boss in radio at the Zone was Lise Hudson, and she became my boss again at the Horn. 10, 12 years later, she came back and she was running the radio station. She was great. And so we had a meeting ahead of COVID to say, okay, what are our options? Because we kind of felt like in the building we were in there in West Austin that, the building's not going to care. If they shut the building down, they're going to shut the building down. So let me go back to the first time. So the last thing I remember, as far as a live broadcast, we were hosting our afternoon show, which had Brad Kellner and Rod and Kevin Dunn. They did a live broadcast from one of my buddies. My buddy had a setup at the Rodeo Barbecue Cook-Off at Barbecue Austin. And I said, hey, Dale, can we give them a power strip and they can come do the show from the Barbecue Cook-Off and really launch the rodeo? That would be fun. And you guys can feed them some brisket or whatnot with the Snake Farm guys. And they were like, and Rod and Kevin, everybody were like, yeah, that'd be awesome. Let's do that. So I went out there just to kind of be around it. And so they're doing the afternoon show live. Everything, I'm making sure technically it's going okay. And I think we're going to do shows that Saturday morning too out there because we had done it the year before. And I look at my phone and I see the alert that South by had been canceled. I think they canceled South by Southwest, which was also starting that weekend. And I was like, oh boy, wow. Which you immediately know, well, this rodeo is probably not going to happen. And this is probably going to be the last live event and public scene that we're a part of for a minute at least, because who knew? And so I just remember that. And then that was a Friday. And then by Monday, we had to come up with a plan because they pretty much shut the city down. Fortunately, we had a good boss and we had a plan. So at the time, and I still do, I live in Onion Creek in South Austin, and there's the golf courses there. So the plan was, and I had gotten approval from Onion Creek because, as the restrictions began and things got to be shut down, we knew it was only a matter of time that our building got shut down, that we were in. They were just going to shut it out. Now what do? I had cleared it with Onion Creek that we could do, Bucky and I could bring equipment and do the show in the upstairs demerit room at the Onion Creek Club, just he and I. And then our producer the building allowed, you just couldn't have a lot of people in your building. So the building back on West Austin allowed our producer to go in and run the show each morning. And so we did the show all summer from the Onion Creek Club. And it was a nice, easy 1 mile drive for me, or I could drive my golf cart up there and do the show. Bucky would come over from his house and we'd turn on the Comrex every morning and do the show. And we did it every morning until they, eased the restrictions. It's probably 3 or 4 months that we were up there in the beautiful demerit room. And they couldn't have been nicer because Onion Creek had shut down too. The course never closed. Like you could play golf, but nothing was happening inside the club. So that's where we set up shop and did the show. And I'd love to go back and listen to some of those shows because they were 3 or 4 hour long shows, and I don't know what we talked about because there were no sports happening. I mean, nothing was going on. We talked about the Lion King. We talked about and actually the listenership was pretty good because people were kind of in the same boat, and they would just listen, and we talk about the day and what was going on, what the news of the day was, how we were handling things, just to be a place where people could, they were stuck in their own house too, or stuck wherever they were, and we were a friendly voice on the radio that were kind of going through it with them. And I do know Onion Creek, partly because we were talking about Onion Creek every morning, but they're and we would say the golf course is still open. You want to come play golf? Their membership almost doubled during that stretch. It really did. Well, we did some advertising for them, but at the same time, people had money that were still working from home or wherever. There's nowhere to spend it. I mean, you're not going on trips. You're not going out to dinner. You're not buying anything other than the essentials and toilet paper. So people started coming and becoming members at Onion Creek because you could still play golf, which they're still way up there now. It really launched them up. So, but for radio, obviously, we saw a huge decline in revenue, sales. Businesses were affected that used to advertise with us now, so they don't have the money to advertise, whatever. And so the impact of that coming out of it was dramatic. But we picked right back up. I mean, we picked back up, and the Longhorns started playing. Longhorns, remember, played football from the Cotton Bowl that year with, because that's where we started doing like the watch parties. Like when the game was on, watch it with us, and we'll watch the game with you. And we can't gather at Schultz Garden and do our pregame shows, but we can do this. And it just you had to flow with it. But once the Longhorns football was saved, and the SEC played their 10-game schedule or whatever it was, we were back in, and by the time this football season was over, most things picked back up.
Right. So I look around this studio and I see the Stars, I see the Express, I see the Gamblers.
Yeah.
So talk to me about, we've talked about your career, but you also mentioned to me a few weeks ago when we initially met about working with the Ice Bats. So this city has gone through this massive transformation of small minor league teams to now an official major league team in soccer, and the Gamblers. So kind of just talk to me about your experience in seeing it evolve over the last 30 plus years.
Well, that's been as dramatic as anything. I mean, but you kind of knew, as I was getting over at the Zone, my wife and I had 3 kids in 5 years, so we were scrambling ourselves. So I wasn't in a hurry to move and kind of go chase, maybe go to Houston or Dallas or whatever, big radio. People have asked me a lot, why didn't you ever leave? I was wasn't good enough. No one wanted me, but I didn't even really pursue jobs outside of Austin because we just liked Austin. And the idea was, let's grow with it. Like, we're on the mornings radio. You've established a name in the market. People trust your name, and what is Austin gonna look like 10 years from now? What's it gonna look like 20 years from now? Was kind of the big picture mindset. Plus, my kids, I wasn't big on moving them all over wherever I wanted to go. Wife was working in school districts and growing in her career, so it was more of I like stable, I like routine. So, but yes, and the idea was, well, Austin's going to grow. Now, could I have foreseen this? I do know, to your point of the Ice Bats, when the Ice Bats came, I was still back there at SportsFan 1490, and that's a funny story because Glenn Norman, who I think he's still doing the PA at the Dell Diamond, right? The PA at the games. If you go to a Round Rock Express game, the voice you hear, at least it has been. I hadn't been out. Game season's just starting now. Glenn Norman, he came in and he worked for the Ice Bats as their media guy, but he was their voice. And so our station cut a deal with the Ice Bats to carry the games on SportsFan 1490, so they have a radio affiliate. I know very little about hockey. I mean, I watched the Olympics. I knew enough about hockey, but we didn't cover it on a daily basis in Austin, Texas. But Glenn asked if I would be his co-host for home games, and I was like, "What do you mean co-host?" And he goes, "No, just come, do color, give scores of out of town scoreboard, whatever. When I have to run and go to the bathroom during halftime, you can do some news updates, whatever." And that turned into 2 years of doing hockey, which was cool, and being around the bats, and it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot about hockey. I learned a lot about full line hockey fights, and I met a lot of cool players. Because into the second year, we started doing like a post game show up in the Belfry Club, which was cool up there in that up there areas at the Expo Center. So it was a lot of fun. So that was another big experience for me to be around that and see Glenn. And it's crazy just how many. So as the city has grown, people like yourself, Kyle, and me, and a lot of the people I've already mentioned are still here. Like I remember vividly, Bucky and I are doing this afternoon radio show on the Zone, and babyface Reed Ryan and JJ Gotch come into our radio station, and everybody kind of knew the name Reed Ryan at that point. He had pitched at Texas, and so I recognized Reed, and they're like, "Hey man, we love your show." This is during a break. Hey, because they just peeked their head in, and they're like, "Hey, we're bringing minor league baseball to Round Rock. Can we come on and talk about it?" And I'm like, and I looked at Bucky, and Bucky's like, "Hell yeah, come on!" And so there's Reed Ryan and JJ Gotch, on our show talking about how they purchased the Jackson Generals, and his dad Nolan's big on it, and we're going to bring it to Round Rock and build this Dell Diamond, which led then I remember for the Zone doing Saturday morning radio, remotes at the peak at the park, and I remember one of the first ones was a big hole in the ground out there on 79, like just a big, dirt's gone, it's just this big hole in the ground. Come out and take a peek at the big hole in the ground. So that, and then here comes the Dell Diamond, and then 26 years ago, and here comes, so I was there with Reed, and so Reed's still around. JJ's now running the Gamblers. I was also part of a Austin Sports Commission, did a lunch panel discussion about, I remember I was on it from the media side. I think there was one of the TV guys was on there. And then Oliver Luck was on it, and he was a executive out of Houston, right? Oliver almost became the AD at Texas at one point. His father is Andrew Luck, but he had helped bring pro soccer to Houston, and he was a big part of that. And he got a law degree from UT. So the Sports Commission brought him in to talk kind of from the business side. When will Austin become a pro town or pro city was kind of the debate. And it was just a good, healthy, I don't think we saw soccer as the one, because the MLS wasn't really a thing at that point, but soccer became the first. We knew we had the Round Rock Express, and it was growing, but that's cool. And now here we are, who knows what's next with, pro sports, but we have the F1 race, which is incredible. I still remember when Bucky and I had, Bobby Epstein on the show when they're going to build an F1 track. I'm like, what? They're building an F1 track? Okay. So yeah, we've been a part of a lot of it and kind of on the front lines with it. But an F1 race, a Major League Soccer team, all that goes on in this market now. The Austin Gamblers won the championship last year. They're the best bull riding team in the league. But I remember JJ, who did Round Rock and did baseball for 20 years, leaving to go to bull riding, and JJ's a good friend. And I'm like, explain this to me. Like, what are you doing? You're leaving baseball to do what? Bull riding. And, he knew that, Michael Dell and a lot of big money was behind this idea. So he's like, there's big money behind it. They're not going to, this is too big to fail kind of thing. They see the metrics. And so now JJ is totally sold on it. And the Gamblers are a lot of fun. If you've never been to the Austin Gamblers, the bull riding, it is as fun a live event as you'll go to. So that's cool. And then there's NASCAR out of Coda. It's a lot of fun. It's been a cool ride to see it grow, but a lot of the same faces are still around. That's the neat thing.
So what would you say is the turning point in Austin where it proved it could support a major sports team?
I just think that the turning point. That's interesting. Maybe the growth of South by Southwest into ACL Festival, where it became a big league city in my mind. Just the idea that, and I think it really, if there was a turning point, it's that the big money that was, because a lot of it's been organic, kind of how it grows, right? I mean, Bobby Epstein's a local guy, and he wanted to bring a racetrack to Austin. Now, I think that he originally wanted to do an amusement park out there, but then the racetrack thing came online, and F1 came. That might have been it as far as, it becoming a major league. But then there's just a lot of money here. So the Columbus Crew and their owner are like, well, let's bring a soccer team to Austin, which is great. But again, soccer makes sense, F1, because here's the thing: we all know the major league team in Texas, in Austin, is UT, and you're never. A football team's not going to win here, and Jerry Jones and the McNair family would never let it happen. People talk about Major League Baseball, and I know there's a group trying to bring the MLB here. That's going to be a challenge too, just because of the cost. But there's enough rich people here. Maybe the NBA, if the Spurs ever wanted to slide uptown, but they've done a good job of keeping their foot in the Austin market. Whatever. And we'll pick that up. But as far as a turning point, I would just have to say when the festival got big and Austin became an international city, and it became Silicon Valley West, right, or East, it became Silicon Valley, and all that money infused, and then people want to spend that money. Owners want people that's got money in their pockets. So that led Anthony Precourt from Columbus to Austin. And is it the first? I don't know what'll be next, but to have soccer, to have F1, to have this level of NASCAR races and things, and they're like MotoGP was last weekend. It was well supported. So, and because it's become a big city and an international city, a lot of people have moved here, obviously, that don't like UT. They want other sports to attend, and they go see them. They support it, and UT still does fine.
Well, that was my next question. How has the fan identity changed for the city, and like how people root for sports and consume sports? So, I mean, you've seen a huge transformation.
Oh man, it's funny because you would think our audience would grow with Austin FC fans and they want to hear more soccer. Well, no. What really has grown our audience and at the Horn and here is the idea, the advent of apps, right? Because the ability to listen to the Horn or to us anywhere in the world, well, that opens up all Longhorn fans everywhere to listen, and we're doing the deep dive coverage. I would imagine our show this morning was the only show you're going to find anywhere that was talking Texas women's basketball, and talked to Chris Plonsky this morning on the show and get her perspective at going to the Final Four, and Vic Schaefer. You're not getting that anywhere else, right? I mean, no one else is doing that on a morning show. Maybe the Zone at their deal, but for that level, no one else is doing that. So the passionate Longhorn fans are still there. We don't do a lot of Austin FC soccer. We haven't found much success with it. I think that audience is a different audience. It's not a sports radio audience. We had, Tim Jackson from the Round Rock Express this morning. They're having their opening day, and so there's a lot of our fans that go to the Dell Diamond, so that makes sense. And no, we don't talk to the guys at Austin FC. I just don't know how tangible the audience is yet, but we talk about it. We give the scores. When they fired the coach, that was a big story. We have special guests on to talk Austin FC. So, but the listening experience has changed by digital quality in the apps. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I mean, the only reason the Zone ever existed, or the Horn ever existed, and now this channel 1027 that I'm on, is radio changed. Radio used to have, people ask us all the time, why is your signal so weak, right? Why is it staticky? The term there used to be, you had to have a big flamethrower radio signal, which are very expensive. And that's what KLBJ FM and AM have. That's what Bob FM at our radio station has. WOAI in San Antonio. These are these big clear channel stations, but those are very expensive. But what allowed local radio to reemerge through the consolidation of radio were things called something called FM translators. So FM translators are radio frequencies that you can put on to an existing tower, and they can broadcast at kind of a low wattage. But they give you a signal, and now you're only going to get some local. You're not going far, and you're going to get spotty in places, and that's where our signal is. That's where a lot of these FM translator signals. But it did give us a voice, right? It let the Horn get back on the radio, and it lets our sister station KLBJ AM has an FM translator that they broadcast on for the local news talk. That all over the country, those brought local radio companies back into play. Coke FM, another example of that. But now that's changing because you don't even need the frequency anymore. You just need an app, and you need a stream. And if you stream, people can find you, and people are getting more and more used to it. So that's ever changing. And then the YouTube thing, you just try to roll with it, and kind of like we've done all along, you just evolve as it happens, and try to keep your feet in both sides. And so I'm on the radio and FM. And if you, like this morning, we had a major transmitter issue with all of our radio stations here. It was a Spectrum cable problem. So we were without a radio signal, like in your car, from midnight until about 8 this morning. But we were still able to talk to a lot of people who were listening on the app and communicating with us on the app. So we've trying to train them to listen on the app as much. And obviously in your car, you're disrupted. But if you're in your car and the signal's out, you can just fire up your phone and throw it on your Bluetooth, and you're listening. So that has changed dramatically. The reach, which gives it, because we still lean into UT a lot, because that audience, we get texts and calls from people that are in Dallas and Houston, and because if you're in Dallas and Houston, they're talking about the Mavericks, or they're talking about the Rockets or whatever. They're not talking about UT, which we provide that, which I think gives us an endless life, because the passion for UT never goes away.
So, looking back on your career, are there any memorable interviews that you had, whether it was a funny interview or a shocking interview, that stick out? I was just thinking, there has to be like these moments. I mean, we talked about 9/11, which I hear you say that, and it was just like, wow.
Yeah.
But yeah, just any specific interviews through the years that stick out to you?
Oh man, so many. I remember this is the first time I interviewed Nolan Ryan was a big deal. And mentioned Reed a minute ago, but I grew up, those games we used to go to in Houston were Astros games, and it was typically when Nolan was pitching, and then we listened to the post game show. So grew up as an Astros buddy. I'm watching Nolan, so I have a son named Nolan, one of my two, and to get to meet him and become friendly with him and his family was incredible. But I remember one spring training, I sat in a dugout with a recorder between Nolan Ryan and Roger Clemens, and just talked to those guys about baseball and over the years, and just really didn't ask much, just let them talk, and recorded it. That was incredible. Nolan and the Rocket just talking ball. Impactful. We used to talk to all the Texas coaches, so Mac Brown was always great. We had strained relationship at times. Mac was a little sensitive, and we might have been a little too opinionated for Mac and Sally. But I'll say this. You know what? Back on the zone? Bucky and I used to talk to Augie Garrido every week. We had a weekly Tuesdays with Augie, we called it. And man, those were impactful. I just enjoyed talking to Augie, talking baseball, talking life, talking whatever, philosophy. Loved those. Those are the fun ones that you get to, they're ongoing kind of thing. And Augie was so genuine and funny. Did that with David Pierce too, and wish we could do it with Coach Schloss. But but then just we've been to Super Bowls, and whoever, you never know who's going to sit down with you at the Super Bowl. Got to see Tiger Woods one time, but didn't get to interview him. But yeah, millions. But those are the ones that are most impactful.
So, what is the biggest missed opportunity in Austin sports that should have happened but didn't? I mean, we talked about the Firebirds a couple of weeks ago. So, just thinking about a moment that something that should have happened in this, because I think back to like that should have happened, or it came eventually. But just kind of from your perspective of seeing the Austin sports scene.
Missing opportunities. Interesting. Well, I mean, as far as the radio side, this is off that topic, but I'll come back to it. When Mac, one of the single biggest events in the thing that didn't happen, it started with, covering Texas in the glory days of Mac Brown and then the end of Mac Brown. People forget that in 2009 into 2010, Mac Brown was going to hand the job to Will Muschamp, who's now back with Steve Sarkisian, the way it all works out. But he was the coach in waiting, and he was back, and that was when Texas was playing Alabama in the national title game. And had Texas won the game, I think everybody understood that Mac was going to step upstairs and Will Muschamp was going to become the head coach. And obviously Colt McCoy got hurt in that game, and Mac didn't leave. And to me, as someone pretty close to it, that began the decline of Texas football, because Mac didn't do it for the right reasons. He did it because he was mad and upset that they didn't win that game, and he can disagree with me on that. But Will Muschamp was already building his first coaching staff. This thing was in play. I mean, Greg Davis, the aforementioned, had found another job because Will wasn't going to retain him. These guys were all planning their lives, and then Mac stops it and says, "No, I'm not leaving." And that particularly led to a really disgruntled 2010, and poor Garrett Gilbert was stuck in that. And they went 5-7, and then Mac ended up firing them all. Like after that didn't go good the next year, shockingly. And then that's when Mac started to chase new coaching staffs, and totally like a fish out of water at some level. And 2011, 2012 weren't great, and then 2013. But that led to the conversation about Nick Saban coming to Austin. Mm-hmm. And so as far as a missed opportunity, you can have your opinion on how Mac Brown dragged that out so it didn't happen, and there's still a lot of you out there that will say that was never going to happen. I believe had it been seamless, I believe Nick Saban would have taken that job in 2014, and that would not have been Charlie Strong, but we'll never know that. But that was the biggest missed opportunity in my mind. And then we all had to languish through Steve Patterson, because for folks that don't know, Steve Patterson was hired specifically to fire Mac Brown, or to move on from Mac Brown, because I mentioned Oliver Luck earlier. Oliver Luck was going to be the AD, but he said, my first job is not going to be to get rid of Mac Brown. I'm not agreeing to that. Mac Brown has done a lot for the university. I'm not going to be that guy. And basically Steve Patterson said, I'll do it. I'll do it. And, we all know the now history of Steve Patterson at Texas, which is not good. But, that could have been Nick Saban coming in, and who knows how it would have gone. Then Charlie Strong, then Tom Herman. So missed opportunity, I would say, the opportunity to bring Nick. But as far as a team, Phoenix Firebirds was big. But the Round Rock Express have done great, and I think they did the right thing. Who knows how that thing works in downtown. I just don't know that there's been another one that we've missed on. When it comes, they take advantage of it. Like I said, I don't think an NFL team can happen. Look, here's what I do think. Last year in April, we went down and covered the Final Four in San Antonio and did live shows down there, and we got to meet with and have on the radio the outgoing mayor of San Antonio was there. Great guy. And he was the first person I ever heard use the phrase megalopolis, the megalopolis. And I was like, okay, explain that. And it's when two metros grow together, essentially. Mm-hmm. Like Dallas-Fort Worth. Sure. Would be considered a megalopolis. And I asked him about the working with Austin and how could that become, the partnership lead to pro sports bigger than what Austin already has, or the Spurs in San Antonio. And he's like, that's been a passion of mine. I think it's something that has to happen. The money's too good. The population boom, what it's going to be now and into the 2030s. So for the listeners out there, the viewers out there, I do think the NFL is possible. And that's actually what the outgoing mayor said at the time. He said the NFL is the one that makes the most sense because we only have 10 home games a year. I mean, you've got 8 regular season games, 2 preseason games. You know, you build a stadium. I mean, Major League Baseball, he says, is a little more of a challenge because it's, 60 nights or 80 nights a year that you got to, fill the place and pay for it and, have access and where you're going to put it. NBA we already have. Call it UT does fine. But something between the two. And I've always said, I'm not sure why New Braunfels or San Marcos can't be Arlington, Texas, where the Cowboys play and the Rangers play and Six Flags, right in between the two. And I think some rich guy is going to see that and say, you know what? We should bring an NFL team to the middle of Central Texas. And I don't know what it would be called at that point. You can't have Dallas. I guess you could have Texas. You could have the Texas whatever. But, Longhorns are going to fight that. But either way, that would be my guess is as far as what we've missed, what we haven't capitalized on is the next level of pro sports, one of the big 3. But football would be my guess is the one. I know maybe it's going to take Jerry Jones to move on to the next life, and maybe it could happen. But at some point, even Jerry Jones will look at it and say, there's just too many people. I mean, we've got 10 million people in the Metroplex. There's 8 million people in Greater Houston. Between San Antonio and Austin, there's going to be 6 to 8 million, and that's growing. So, yeah, we have plenty of, if New York can have 2 teams and Chicago or LA can have 2 teams in the NFL, there's no reason Texas can't have a third.
Right.
And that's why I do think the passion for the sport, football is the passion and the religion of this state. It could handle a third NFL team for 8 Sundays a year plus playoff.
Well, and you mentioned being in San Marcos in that area. That's close to Coda. I mean, that's all in that.
Oh yeah,
Coda's right there. I mean, they could build a facility right by Coda.
Oh yeah, I mean, no question. And we've had these debates on the radio between 35 and I-130 is, nothing. Yeah. There's nothing out there. You ever fly over it, you see there's a lot of open space. And yes, from say Lockhart west, Martindale area, you could build a football stadium. And yes, because of 130, you'd have easy access up from San Antonio. You'd have easy access down from Central Texas and from the airport. 100%. And look around the NFL. The Cowboys playing Arlington. That's nowhere close to the airport, or nowhere close to Dallas or Fort Worth. New England plays in Foxborough. The Bears are about to move to Indiana, potentially out of Chicago. So yes, I would put that up there pretty high because I do think with the billionaires and the tech billionaires and the money, everybody can look at the population base and its passion for football, what it can mean. And at some point, even Jerry Jones and the McNair family say that's more revenue for us, and we're not really competing with them. That's more revenue in our pockets, and that's what those owners are all about.
Couple more questions for you, Erin. Someone new to Austin and wants to understand the city through sports. What are 3 experiences or moments they have to take in?
Oh, sports or activities? Because I would say taking a walk on the Zilker Loop, the park, is a hike and bike trail.
Well, I mean, sports, like to understand the city's sports scape, I guess.
Okay. Well, I would say that too, because I do think one of the reasons Austin is what it is, as far as Austin in Central Texas, in my experience, is a active go do it community more than go sit and watch it community. I really believe that. Now it's becoming different, but they'd rather go hike on the hike and bike trail or kayak on Lady Bird Lake or go out to the lake and water ski, which is great. But at the same time, as far as to the ultimate Austin sports experience would have to include a game at Dishwalk Field. I mean, I think that is, a big SEC series, sitting in the Yeti Yard, taking in the Longhorns against somebody, a rival. They play Texas State tonight. That would be a lot of fun. I think that has to be something you do. I do think going to see an Austin FC game, and it is, you may not even like soccer, but the energy of the place, the crowd, it never gets quiet. It is what it's all about. And yeah, I mean, come on, this is cliche, but you got to go to a game day at Texas football. I mean, you just do. I mean, you got to take in Bevo Boulevard. I mean, I would suggest going to the Texas OU game if you can get in, but that's not in Austin. But that features what the Austin market is about. I would also throw in there, going to a really, really great high school football game. I mean, I think that if you're talking about the temperature of Austin, Texas, go out to a game at Lake Travis University or a Westlake game, or go drive out to Dripping Springs on a Friday night and check out a ball game there. Any of these small towns, used to be small towns, and take in a high school football game on a Friday night. I mean, I think you're getting the temperature of what Austin's all about.
All right, last one for you. Where do you see the Austin sports scene in 25 years?
Oh, wow.
I mean, you kind of just talked about the NFL
Yeah,
aspect,
I think
so.
NFL. I mean, but I think, because who would have said, 40 or 50 years ago what Arlington would look like? And I know that's the example, but the Metroplex was kind of ahead of Austin at that point. And so I don't know why something like the megalopolis conversation wouldn't exist, where you could have an NFL team. And if you get an NFL team down there, that could bring a baseball team of some kind. And I don't know if MLB would expand, but at the same time, they could, or a team could move. There could be one of those struggling teams in Florida that just says there's just too many people there and they love it, baseball. So I would say that the scene is going to continue to expand towards San Antonio and the megalopolis, and I do think that's kind of the trajectory. But at the same time, I hope, and I do think Austin will still stay the cool, you can hardly say keep Austin weird anymore, but it's not Houston or Dallas, I think, is the number one way to say it. It's not Houston or Dallas, and that's, having grown up in Houston, I'm glad it's not Houston or Dallas. I hope we can keep some Austin uniqueness to the conversation, I really do. But I think that with the population boom, it's inevitable of what's going to happen between the two cities. And they're going to, the cool part about Austin and San Antonio, I think, is that they're so different. Like they're from the ethnicities to the, what Austin is all about with high tech and, music and buzz, totally different in San Antonio, as far as, but that's cool. Like, kind of like Dallas and Fort Worth, they're totally different. One's Cowtown and one's, the land of $30,000 millionaires, you know what I mean? And then fast cars. Austin and San Antonio can be just turn it the other way. That's east to west. This is north south, and I think that would be my best guess of where it's going. It's going to grow south. There'll be more pro teams, and but hopefully Central Austin stays as close to what it is, or as close as it can. And I hope they finish some of these construction projects.
Okay. The last follow up is, where are you in 25 years? Are you still covering the Austin sports scene?
Oh gosh, I'm 53. I'd be almost 80. I hope not. But if someone wants me, I'll be that old guy on the radio yelling about things. That's fine. Hopefully I'm hanging out with my grandkids and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't plan to move. I don't know. I hope maybe I'll have a home in the mountains somewhere too. But at the same time, Austin's home. I don't know that there's a rush to race off. I've put in 27 years here in media and college before that, so 30 years plus. No reason to run out now. But no, I hope I'm here. I don't know if I'll still be talking on the radio. But if I am, I'm sorry.